is the second edition of the Africa 2017 Investment Summit titled Business for Africa and the World, which took place in Sham El Sheikh, Egypt. I'm All News Sunday. In a few minutes, I'll take you through highlights from this three-day business summit. Thank you so much for joining us. Africa 2017 Forum was the second edition of the Investment Summit organized by Egypt's Ministry of Investment and International Cooperation and the COMESA Regional Investment Agency. The 2017 edition kicked its first day off with a focus on young entrepreneurs. The Young Entrepreneurs Day began with engaging panel discussions and 4 workshops on key themes such as access to finance, entrepreneurship, ecosystems, and impact investment.
To really invest in the widest possible supply chain, it's really important not to be following the American business models, but to create your own African business models. I agree that we shouldn't be looking to the past, but coming from an ancient civilization called India, China, you look at, Egypt is an ancient civilization. Those civilizations were built on human capital, intellectual capital, financial capital, and they were built on leveraging the trade networks, across those 3 continents.
While most entrepreneurs concentrate on building business ideas aimed at solving one problem or another, investors here say it's important to build for-profit businesses.
The World Bank and other institutions spend somewhere between $1,500 and $3,000 to create a job in many countries, through employer subsidies, through training, through whatever. For less than that, and that money's gone because that person's the first person laid off when a company does a cutback because they got a subsidy for 6 months and a year later they get rid of them. We invest that same amount and get a return every year. On average, you get a 20% return on that $3,000 cost that it costs to create a job. So for the same amount of money invested in VCs and invested in startups and invested in these young people, you get a positive return instead of doing job training to teach them how to go clean the streets or whatever it is they're teaching them.
It's really important that we build for-profit entrepreneurs, because if Mr. Lumulu had not been a for-profit entrepreneur, he wouldn't have the capital that he has generated through his own work to be able to reinvest in the future generation.
We're seeing a lot of startups around natural resources, around agriculture tech, which is extremely important foundationally, right? Or that just happen to have a double bottom line. They're for-profit businesses, but they're also solving infrastructure problems, famine problems, education problems, healthcare problems, right? Or even just simple payments and getting money moving around, like M-Pesa or something. So those are just foundational businesses. We love those kind of businesses.
Promoting cross-border business and building an entrepreneurial ecosystem cannot be handled by private companies alone. The role of government here is key.
Kenya has been labeled the Silicon Savannah, most notably because of this innovation of M-Pesa, which is the mobile money transfer system. And when I think about how it became known as Silicon Valley, I think in Kenya's context, the government has played a role in creating that enabling environment for the ecosystem that we now enjoy. So the government was quick to realize the importance of allowing an innovation like M-Pesa to work within the country. It completely flouted the banking rules at the time, and the central bank governor at the time said this is something that can work, and they were willing to forego some hardcore rules to allow the system to flourish.
So what I think is missing is what the government is not doing right. And I think that the first principle is do less. Be less present. Don't crowd out the private initiative, which you see, pretty much everywhere. Not Africa only, though, by the way. And third, create the framework, the rule of law, the conditions, the mainstream economics that Isham was referring in the beginning. If you do that, investment will flow, and African entrepreneurs east, west, north, south, will be able to go after, to define their own roadmap.
Developing attractive value propositions to attract the much-needed finance is important to any business. Following the presidential panel, 18 startups took the stage to pitch their businesses to a global audience of investors and ecosystem partners.
Africa has many disparate payment systems across countries, and linking these together is very difficult. SimbaPay has found a way to do this and to allow you to send money between African countries at lightning speed and at a low, fair cost.
This is where people come with zero deposit, open an account with a cooperative, be members of the community, and they pay $2.5 every day for less than 2 years, and they own the motorbike. We are the missing link between the cooperative and the members. This is not possible if it were not for our team of 4, but with 60 years of experience in technology, marketing, and operations. And they want nothing less than to put Inukapap onto the global map.
2017 was the year of the Egyptian woman. With inclusive growth at the center of discussions, diversity in the boardrooms took center stage with the theme Women at the Top.
We were talking investment, and the room was full. But as you introduced the session, obviously, quite a number of people left, because there is sheer lack of understanding of the importance of this session. It is clearly assumed to be the matter about women. But the question to ask, if the population of the world, averagely all of our African countries, is men to women about 50 to 50, only a stupid businessman takes 50% of his asset and locks it up in a room without fully utilizing it. So, in reality, if we're looking to increase the productivity of the African continent, if we really want our countries to be great, it's not a choice. It's a real sensible, smart thing for us to do, to be deliberate about investing in our girl child, building our women up to deliver the potentials and their talents in building the community and our countries.
At this panel, Rwanda seemed to be one country getting it right.
Including women is not something that happens just because you've removed barriers. Removing barriers is important, but including women has to be deliberately done. So our president, for example, is a champion of gender inclusiveness. So he worked very hard to make sure the laws were favorable. If anything was discriminating against women, he removed that. If women have equal access to education, to healthcare, to everything. But that wasn't enough to just remove all the barriers. What was very important is that when the president was given people to appoint in public offices, he always said, do we have at least 3 women out of that list? So, and if people came back and said, no, we don't have enough women to occupy this post, he'd say, no, we'll keep them vacant until you find women. So go out there and find these women. And so somebody has to be a champion. If you're a CEO of a company, if you're a chairman of a board, you have to be deliberate. You have to find these women.
While some governments gradually make room for women at the top, finding women suited for positions at the top is another matter.
I want to start a little bit earlier. The baby, the girl, the child. How are you differentiating right from the day the child is born? This one is in pink. This one plays with dolls. The boy plays with computers. This one cooks. That's where it starts.
We should be focusing on making the women ready to meet the minimum requirements. In Rwanda, when we're trying to encourage more women, we discovered that there were few women that had degrees. And so what the government did is made working hours stop at 3:30 p.m. in the afternoon, and then encouraged women to go for afternoon classes. So we started degree programs. A lot of women went back to school. Today, a lot of women are ministers in cabinet, and they went back to school to get degrees. Within 4, 5, 6 years, you see a very big difference because you're encouraging and making it easy for them to leave work at 3:30 and go and get a degree in the afternoon. So that's what we should be focusing on, making women ready, not lowering the standards because we want more women there.
With about 65% of the world's uncultivated arable land, Africa is believed to have the future of global food supply in its hands. But the lack of access to land, finance, markets, and technologies remain obstacles to overcome. These barriers were discussed at the Agribusiness panel.
Maybe we should talk about a Pan-African approach as well. And there are already initiatives, definitely led by the NEPAD, by the African Union. But to be honest with you, in my view, in agribusiness, we don't yet have a Pan-African strategy.
While access to land and finance remain a major challenge for players in the agriculture sector, Farouk Gumel, the executive director and head of agribusiness at TGI Nigeria, says in order to boost agribusinesses on the continent, the role of government must go beyond providing access to financial resources and land.
Now, a lot of governments talk, and they talk about this utopia of having one Africa doing one thing. But the reality, to be honest, is every government has its own policy and every government has to look after its own people. So, for example, in my country, our government has provided us with financial support, our government has provided us with policy support, our government has provided us with tax incentives for investments. However, for that farmer to make money or that processor to make money, he's not competing with domestic producers or domestic processors. Olam and us, we are in rice today. The biggest competitor for Nigerian produced rice is in India and Thailand. The rice comes to a country that is neighboring Nigeria and finds its way into the market competing with my product. Now, if our government will sit down and talk to the governments of those countries where these items are brought in, because then you find a way of protecting your investment.
For Sue Kahumbu, a creative director at Green Dreams Technology, the most important factor in agribusiness is always overlooked.
And we have to focus on them. Every single thing that we eat, every single thing that we depend on is dependent on the soil. And we're not going to get away from having to educate smallholder farmers on production. We miss that. That is the biggest link. Lucy, you're talking about where the link is. The link is we talk about resources and capital, and the resources on this continent are people, and we ignore the smallholder farmers when it comes to education. And I think this is where we need to stand up and take responsibility. If we want food sovereignty, let's feed our countries first before we're thinking about exporting. Feed our people first.
During the three-day gathering, the forum hosted 6 heads of states and top business leaders from across the continent. They all demonstrated engagements to strengthen intra-Africa trade through cooperation and recognizing the importance of the private sector and governments to do so. And that's it on the CNBC Africa special featuring highlights from the Africa 2017 summit, which took place in Sham El Sheikh, Egypt. I'm Onyi Sunday. Thank you so much for watching. Ma salama. Ici ou d'ailleurs, nous sommes des enfants